Of course, one of the big issues from last year was AI. It's all right if we make mistakes because now we've got machines to do that for us. It's okay if perhaps our own humanity gets in the way because we can just tech our way out of this issue. Now, is that a little bit too optimistic? I've seen the movies. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Joining me on the program now from Maxim Institute, Maryanne Spurdle. Kia ora, good morning.
Good morning, Andrew.
It is a nice thought, isn't it? That us humans, created in God's image, we're creative types. We can tech our way out of anything. Give me like a Swiss Army knife and a bottle of Diet Coke, and I can MacGyver any problem that comes my way. It's a nice way to think, although history tells us that doesn't usually work out that way, right?
Yeah, I think we've got an idea of history that shows this constant progression, and we keep getting, better and better at everything
Yep.
with our accumulated knowledge. But actually, we haven't got less stupid. We haven't got less reckless. We just have got some more powerful tools.
Yeah, I mean, recklessness, depending on your perspective or perhaps your personality type, some people would say recklessness, another way of describing that is innovation, is trying things that we haven't tried before. The opposite of recklessness, I suppose, is being far too safe, not taking risks, not innovating. That's also dangerous.
Yeah, you gotta fail if you're going to try something new.
Yeah,
The question is the risk of failure worth the potential rewards?
yeah.
And that's where you can be either too naive and optimistic or too pessimistic.
It's one thing if you're inventing light bulbs, try and try again, etc. But
Yeah.
it's another thing if the thing that we're experimenting with is human genetics, or hey, we don't really know whether or not this vaccine works. Let's do live tests on, I don't know, the entire human population. A bit of concerns in this space, and whether or not the technology is going to counterbalance a little bit of human recklessness, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah, it was quite interesting. And the reason the column I wrote was on this topic is because for a couple weeks here, we have the chance to submit on two different things. There's the Royal Commission Phase 2, the inquiry into the COVID response.
Yep.
Phase 2 is looking at details like vaccine efficacy, mandates, basically how the government and science interact, and what was done well, what wasn't, what could have been done differently. So we have the opportunity to give feedback on that, and it's something that really should be reflected on.
Yep.
Meanwhile, on the 17th, so next Monday, submissions on the gene technology bill close. The intention is to get this bill passed this year well before we have the results of the inquiry that would really have some very useful input into this,
Yep.
because we had gene technology out in full force. And as of, I don't know when the scales tipped, but it's definitely not a conspiracy theory anymore to say that COVID itself is gene technology.
Yeah.
We do know that there was gain of function research on coronaviruses, two labs right where it started. And even the CIA and others who initially were like, that's a conspiracy theory, are going, oh, actually, it's the most probable
Yeah.
source. So what we have experienced over the past 5 years is a taster of what is possible
Yeah.
when gene technology is not regulated well. So the gene tech bill is suggesting that New Zealand be one of the more liberal regions when it comes to this. They're saying that we're behind the rest of the world, but in some ways we are actually very friendly to the kind of big companies that develop this.
Yep.
We and the US are the only countries that allow pharmaceutical companies to advertise direct to consumers. So we're not, overly cautious when it comes to big companies that are working in this field.
Yep.
And this, unlike the EU, which limits it just to plants, we would allow experimentation on microbes and animals.
And
Self-replicating material that once it gets into the environment, you can't take back.
yeah, exactly. Now, microbes in animals is one thing, but microbes and animals are part of the same ecosystem that human beings live in. So actually, we're experimenting with the ecosystem that supports us. So, yeah, we're not experimenting on humans, but sort of we are, because
Well,
we're...
there would be experiments that involve humans.
Exactly. And even if we're experimenting on a different part of the environment, that's going to impact us as humans. We are the canary in our own coal mine to an extent.
Yeah, everything's interconnected, and
Yep.
it's got economic implications as well. One of the risks is to our exports. The New Zealand Institute of Economic Research has estimated that the primary sector exports could go down by between $10 and $20 billion a year
Yep.
if GMOs are released into the environment.
Mm.
So that, as a risk, is massive.
Yeah.
And I'd say even if you find a cure for a disease here, that's not worth completely wiping out that much of our sector. This is not research that has to happen
Yeah.
here. We
Yeah.
don't have to be the petri dish. And it's being pushed through before we've been able to look overseas and say, how has it gone? And what we do know about how it's gone overseas, as far as successes, profits for the country, risks, none of it really gives us any signals that we should be jumping on board the train, you know?
Certainly, government rhetoric, even in the last week, is all about, hey, let's remove obstacles to economic growth. We need to be a prosperous little nation at the bottom of the South Pacific that boxes above our weight, as it were. So, hey, if the environment's in the way, let's get those frogs out of the picture so we can start digging holes for resources. If, I don't know, people concerned about genetic engineering is in the way, hey, let's move that off the table so that we can do big deals at some symposium with multinational companies looking for a place to do their testing and to do their research. The government seems to be going all out at the moment. Economic growth is the only goal, and, well, to throw a Trekkie metaphor in there, everything else is the expendable crew member.
And I don't understand how this is supposed to grow our economy, because if you look at the States, which is home to a lot of these big corporations that are involved in GMO stuff and pharmaceuticals and technology, and I mean, a lot of it has come up with wonderful things, but a very small percentage of what's been tried has been wonderful. And when it comes to gene editing, what they call quaintly the off-target effects are actually baked in, because you can't just switch a gene on or off and change one thing. They're all interconnected, and they all do multiple things in our systems, and they don't even understand how at the cellular level things are working. They have a little glimpse into it. So these off-target effects are not something they're ever going to get rid of.
Yeah.
Even if they do, even if some miracle cures pop out, the profits go to those companies, those multinational companies. In the States, the regulatory bodies are actually in the pockets of the big companies. You've got people at the FDA who have personal, financial, and also professional interests in the industry that they're regulating, which explains a lot about why the FDA allows things that the rest of the world is going, why? Or conversely, saying, oh, the FDA allows it, we will too. And that's another problem with this bill. It would rubber stamp anything that two recognized authorities overseas have approved.
Yeah.
Well, if you're rubber stamping what the FDA approves, you definitely are not taking New Zealand's interests into account.
You're
It's
using
far more likely.
Exactly. You're using what is a corrupt system as a role model for how we should behave, which doesn't seem that wise even without using AI, right?
And even if they're not corrupt, they're not taking New Zealand interests into account. We've got our own environment, we've got our own exports, and also it would be a single regulator. This bill would propose a person who's responsible to the minister be the regulator, deciding which is high risk and low risk, what can be rubber stamped, what needs. Instead of there being public feedback, industry feedback, a group of people who are actually independent and can, have checks and balances on each other.
Yeah.
So it's an incredibly bad idea. Like, if we're going to liberalize it, don't do it this way.
And honestly, the so-called checks and balances is actually people who also don't know. We don't know what we don't know, so let's experiment. Let's make New Zealand the petri dish at the bottom of the South Pacific and send all the profits overseas to multinational companies. We take all the risk, they get all the profit. That just sounds like a terrible business model.
Yeah, I can see why they would want it. I don't know why we would.
Exactly. Now, you mentioned, Maryanne, that there is submissions on a couple of different issues, the stage 2 of the COVID one, but also with this GM testing. You've published this article, the conversation we've had based on the article you've published on the Maxim Institute. Does that include more information or even links to where people can make submissions? How do people find out more information about that?
Yeah, in the column, I do include links to the submissions and also links to some of the evidence backing up some of the conversations here, because once you start looking into it, there are a lot of really concerning things. Yep. Over the past 5 years, the potential going forward, there are a lot of questions that I think people should be aware of. And yeah, those submissions, there are links there, or you can go to the government website.
Hey, recommend people check out the article as well, maxim.org.nz. Maryanne, thank you for the work that you do. Thanks for taking the time to chat with us today.
Cheers, take care.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.